Okay.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to our presentation tonight. My name is Liz Tridiak. I am the Northborough Senior Center Director, and I'm thrilled that you're all here with us on Zoom tonight. I think if we weren't in the middle of a pandemic, we'd be here in the Senior Center. We'd be getting ready to have a big dinner, maybe some mocktails, something really fun. But alas, here we are, and I'm still really thrilled that you're here with us. We have a fantastic presenter here tonight. Her name is Ren Antonowicz.
Antonowicz, close. Very
Antonowicz, oh,
good.
I'm so sorry. I should have practiced that a little more. So Ren right now is in Vermont. She's not even in the state right now, and she's up there in Vermont where it's very cold. And she's going to do this presentation for us tonight called Cocktail Culture, Fashion of the Mad Men Era. Now, this isn't just a hobby for Ren. This is actually, you have a degree in this.
Yes.
You have your master's degree in this. This is
Yeah.
incredible. So we're so lucky to have you. And I've talked enough. I'm going to hand it over to you, Ren.
Thank you so much, Liz, and welcome to everybody. I'm so happy you're here. Brightens my days because, as Liz said, this is something, it's my career, it's my job, but I have a passion for it. So I've really missed it since the pandemic. And if we didn't have Zoom, I wouldn't be able to do this. So this is wonderful. So thank you. I do have a degree, but I haven't been working full time doing this because there have been so many other things going on. I was teaching for 13 years at the college level. And then I started doing these presentations on the side and realized how much I loved them. And so I kept doing them. I was going all over the place, and we ended up moving to Vermont. And we've been here for almost 2 years now, a year and a half to 2 years. And I love it, but I am a little further away from everybody. But I didn't have a problem commuting until the pandemic hit. So now it's even easier with Zoom because I have my whole collection of items, which I'll be showing you after I do the presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. There's a lot of slides because there's so many images I want to share with you. However, I'll move a little quicker, and then so that doesn't take us until midnight. I want you to be able to enjoy the images and then the clothing and accessories, which what I do is I bring them as close to the computer lens as I can so you can get a good view of it. And I was saying to Liz, it's not as good as when we're in person. Then you could come up and feel it, touch it, and really see it well, but it's the next best thing. So we'll have you enjoy that as much as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Open this first. Let's see. Share. Sometimes it gets a little tricky here. Can everybody see that? Whoop. Can everybody see that, I hope? Thumbs up? Okay, good. All right. Great, thank you. Okay. Okay. Why the Mad Men era? Well, the cocktail culture, just a quick introduction, it really started much earlier. It started in the 20s. Think about Prohibition and how people were not supposed to drink. Of course, the first thing that happens to many people is when someone tells them they can't do something, they want it more. And that's human nature. So people found a way to drink, whether it was at speakeasies or at a friend's home or their own home. So the cocktail parties at home really began in the 20s. But by the time we got to the 50s and 60s, which is what I'm highlighting today, we really had it down pat. We had it right. We had, the right dress, the right surroundings in our homes. People were showing off their homes. Think about it. The 50s was after World War II. So we were looking into men going back to work and women going back into the homes, raising their families and using their homes as a showpiece. If you saw Mad Men, this is a series that lasted 7 seasons. I absolutely loved it. I've seen the whole thing twice. Wonderfully done. And they really show you what that era was like. It was really 1960 to 69 that they're representing, but the early 60s was more like the 50s in terms of dress and style. So I do start with the 50s, and then I'm going to move into the 60s as well. I'm going to finish the presentation with a few slides from an exhibition that was at Rhode Island School of Design a number of years ago, and I taught a class at the same time about cocktail culture. And I'll show you some slides from their exhibit. They had not just clothing and accessories, they had furniture, they had decor, they had barware. It was wonderful. So I'll show you some slides from that to finish up. Okay, let's go ahead and start with the Mad Men era. This is a picture of my giant family. I got married in 2012. I'll show you the wedding dress I wore. You can see that in that picture. We had a Mad Men themed wedding. That's why I'm showing you this picture. This was in Attleboro at Colonel Blackington Inn. I have 7 stepchildren, so no kids of my own. So I married this wonderful man, and his kids are grown, as you can see, and they're terrific. So we did have a Mad Men theme. So my husband and I dressed up in 50s style. I have a 50s dress, and my kids didn't have to, but the people who stood up for us did dress in more the 50s style. So it was a lot of fun. Okay, well, what was it like? Well, to start in one period, like the 1950s, I always go back to the period before so that you can see the transition. So in this example, this is from the wartime, World War II. It was sort of frozen, the fashion. There weren't a whole lot of changes. There were a lot of restrictions. Women were wearing much more utilitarian type garments. They had to get very kind of creative with other things like their accessories, their hats, sometimes their shoes, because there were restrictions in clothing and amount of fabric that could be used and embellishments and that kind of thing. Once the war was over, the look changed. And Christian Dior was a designer and in Paris. And in 1947, in the spring collection, he came out with his new look. The new look was actually called the Korres line, but Carmel Snow, the editor-in-chief at the time of Harper's Bazaar, dubbed it the new look because it was completely different from what we'd been seeing. So if you look at this picture, you're seeing a much more nipped-in waist than we saw in the previous slide. The shoulders are softer, no more shoulder pads, and we see longer skirts again, no more restrictions. So you're seeing below the knee dresses, whether they're really full skirts or very tight, what we now call wiggle dresses or wiggle skirts, because they're so narrow at the hem, a woman is forced to wiggle when she walks. So when I show you a clip of Mad Men, you'll see one of the character's name is Joni. She's the office manager, and she has a very voluptuous figure, and she always wears those very tight wiggle dresses. So you'll see that in action as well. So we're going again here, looking at the old styles from World War II, which was very basic compared to what we start to see in the 50s. So the hemline, as I said, lengthened, the waistline nipped in again, and the shoulders became much more rounded and softer. But the breasts became very pointy. The bras were very, very pointy, almost like bullets or rockets. And it was just this new silhouette that women were embracing in this time period, quite different from the previous one. Post-war, again, Christian Dior's new look. These are examples of both full skirts and very narrow skirts, as you can see here. You can see the hem is very, very narrow and just about hits above the calf. And it's quite narrow, and it looks like it fits like a second skin. Women needed shapewear for that. They definitely, whether they were models or not, the shapewear, such as the girdles of the time, long line bras, would really give that body the shape it needed to be able to wear this particular silhouette. So that's what we'll see. Even with the full skirts, women still wore the girdles to give that nice cinched waistline. Here's some more examples. You're seeing on the right, that's Christian Dior's bar suit, it was called. So it has sort of like a peplum over the longer skirt, and so more of a suit for day wear. And just a casual outfit you see on the left. I just love the images of women from this period. And don't forget, the 50s was all about everything matching. So hats, shoes, bags, gloves, etc. Just wonderful. Even jewelry, we'll talk about that later, but how jewelry even had matching sets as well during this period. Again, another example of full skirt and a very narrow skirt. Both have little jackets with peplums, and both have a very cinched waist. There's our bullet bra, ladies. Very, very trussed up, you know, almost like when you think about the Victorians and how everything was just pushed and pulled every which way. Look at the girdles on the right, between the pointy bras and those very tight girdles. Not a lot of room to move. The difference is the girdles from this period, because of the new synthetic fabrics like nylon, nylon was used during the war, so it was unavailable, but then it became available again after the war. Nylon is much lighter and very strong. So instead of the old corsets, which were much heavier, these were a lot lighter, but they were still uncomfortable. They still made everything, you know, push in and rearrange itself, sort of. So not a very comfortable place to be, but it did give the figure to the ladies, and that's what they wanted. This is called the Merry Widow. The Merry Widow was a strapless bra, often extending a little over the hips, as you can see here, with very long garters, because we didn't have pantyhose yet, not until about 1960. So you're still seeing the separate stockings. Look at the boned corset on the left, that a girdle, but it's very boned, just like the corsets of old. Again, just much lighter. And still with that very structured pointy bra, as you can see there. You can see the petticoats underneath as well. Little petties, they started to call them, little petticoats for ladies wearing those full skirts to make them stick out. They had a lot of stiff netting made out of nylon and tulle. And I have a long, beautiful evening petticoat, or evening actually could be a skirt. I'll show you that later as well. But beautiful, all kinds of different colors and different widths. But notice how a lot of the petticoats had the same line, so that over the hips was snug, and then the skirt puffed out from there. And that's what the dresses often did. So of course, whatever's underneath has to support what's going over it. As I said, nylon became a revolutionary kind of a fabric for women who wanted to wear tight girdles but didn't want heavy foundations on. So good control and a little bit better comfort than they'd had before. And you didn't see women really leaving the house without wearing some kind of foundation. Pictures of cocktail parties, as I said, especially in the 50s, people were entertaining at home. A lot of times men, businessmen, think of the gray flannel suit, the working man, and going to work every day, and would bring their associates. Sometimes their boss would come home for dinner, and before dinner they'd have cocktails. And so there were all these little picky things like, you know, olives and celery with cream cheese. I just remember this from when I was a little kid. My mom and dad would entertain just their neighbors or, you know, relatives, and they'd have these kind of crazy little picky cocktails. And I just found the other day, I'll show you later, in the original box from the 50s is a set of cute little fancy cheese picks to pick up your little blocks of cheese. I'll show you that later too. But it was a very good way to impress your friends and neighbors and to show off your home. Many times there was a bar right in the living room. So, you know, the man would be making the drinks and the woman would be serving the food. You can see that right here. In addition to the styles I've shown you, the two different silhouettes, things started to change a little bit as we got into the mid to late 50s, and we started to see a little bit more of a loosening of the silhouette. So you can see on the left, that's Cristobal Balenciaga, another famous designer from that time. His 55 collection was more of a looser fit chemise. So you can see the skirt is still a narrow hemline, but instead of a cinched waist, you have more of a tunic fit in the top. And then even on the right, the Dior 55 collection, remember 47 was the first one like this. By 55, you can see a little bit more loosening at the waist. So it is moving along, and there are more options available for ladies. These different silhouettes showed up during this time, and you can see all different, you know, pretty much the same shape, but with little different details. And look at the coat on the far left, that almost cocoon type style. That was an interesting change of pace too, from what we saw in 47 and 48. So lots of different chemise type dresses, which are going to lead to the shift dresses of the 60s. Trapeze dresses were much looser, as you can see. and just sort of fell from the shoulder in an A-line shape. And that's going to carry right into the 60s, but it did start in the mid to late 50s. All of the Paris houses, remember during the war, Paris fashion houses were closed because of the war, so, and occupation and such. So American designers really came to the forefront. And there was she was Lord & Taylor's, I'm blanking out. When it gets late in the afternoon, sometimes my words don't come to me. I apologize for that. But she worked for Lord & Taylor. She really promoted, her name was Dorothy Shaver. She really promoted fashion from American designers, and she featured them in the store. So she was president of Lord & Taylor, I guess she was. And she really focused on people from America here. And so we had some famous names, not just out of Paris, but now out of America. So names such as Charles James, Gilbert Adrian, who worked for MGM, but then eventually had his own fashion atelier, Claire McCardle, Norman Norell, and other designers from this area from America who became much more well-known. Not all women really like the new silhouette. Think about it. The comfort of the clothes from the 40s, the shorter hemlines, the less restrictive girdles or corsets, just simpler lines for ladies. They started to get used to that and like it. So they had protests. Not all women wanted to wear the extremes of those silhouettes. So they had these temperate versions of this new silhouette to make the ladies happy. And you can see some, they look like a little older women maybe didn't want to embrace something that was so new and much more uncomfortable. Another major thing in the 50s that went into the 60s and beyond were the synthetic fabrics available. They became wash and wear. So everybody wanted to get a washer and a dryer when they were setting up house. And so that everything could just be thrown in the dryer and not worried about, because they didn't wrinkle as much. They didn't shrink because they were synthetic rather than the cotton and silks and linens, which can tend to shrink upon washing and drying. So this allowed women to have a much easier time of it in the home and to sort of embrace this new way of caring for clothing for them and their families as well. Here's an example of the suburbs, which became, of course, all the rage after the war. So people didn't want to be in the cities anymore. They were working in the city. The father, let's say the husband, was working in the city, and the wife and the children would be living in the suburbs, and the husband would, of course, come home at night and have his dinner. And, if you think about the typical, if you ever saw Leave It to Beaver, I mean, that was a little bit more, hard to believe that every family was just like that, because they weren't. But that was sort of the ideal, having a nice home, the wife keeping the home beautiful for the husband and the children, and cooking all of the meals. Then they had the weekends. The husband would come home, not working on the weekends most of the time, and they could wear play clothes. So they started having barbecues with their neighbors and wearing, play clothes, having a good time, and being a little bit more casual. And that's what you're seeing here. A lot of matching outfits for families, mother, father, and children having similar fabrics. It's a trip. Another influence in fashion in the 50s and beyond were, of course, movies, but also TV. So movies were around since the 20s, and movies were a very big deal in the 1930s and 40s before TV came into most people's homes. So people were watching their favorite actresses and imitating their styles. And then eventually, of course, we had television. So now they have another way of looking at what is becoming fashionable. So shows like Donna Reed and I Love Lucy, people were imitating those fashions as well as those at the movies. So again, for a while, you're going to see the same kind of variation over and over again until the late 50s. And then even early 60s, it still sort of sticks around until the early to mid 60s, when we start to see a completely different look with the London look coming in. Here's Lucy from I Love Lucy. Maternity wear became more important and better designed because of the baby boom in the 50s. So, and Lucy, I believe, was the first woman on television shown pregnant. So that was a very big deal too. But yes, maternity wear was becoming more important for women, of course, because they had that demand for it. Bikinis were not as big here as they were in Europe right away. It took a little longer. So women were covering up a little bit more until the 60s when, you know, the bikinis really started to show up here, especially with teenagers and young women. But notice the matching bathing suit designs and fabrics, very popular for families. Just like any other period of time, coats and outerwear have to allow for whatever the silhouette is underneath. If you have a wide skirt, you can't have a very tight fitting coat, obviously. Where's the skirt going to go? So I love that beautiful red coat on the left with the matching hat, because it releases into a full skirt. So a lady could wear either a full skirt or a narrow skirt and it wouldn't matter. Her coat would allow for that. And then car coats became big because women were driving their cars more, and they wore these coats that were easy to get in and out of their vehicles. So that was a very big deal too. Swing coats became important in the 60s especially, so they didn't have much of a waistline, if any at all, much looser fit. So you'll see a lot of that coming up as well. Oh, I don't know why that's not letting me go. There we go. These are just examples of evening dresses. The 50s was all about a lot of strapless evening wear. And it's think about girls, young girls going to their proms. They're wearing these strapless dresses. And remember the Merry Widow, the bra, the strapless bra, girdle combination. That would have been very important for these kinds of fashion. So evening wear, most of the time below the knee, long, not always to the floor. That came later. In the 60s, you started to see more of that again. But in the 50s, you're seeing more of a, you know, new look type silhouette, but often strapless. And you're seeing some other examples here. That black one in the middle, I'll tell you, that's classic. You could wear that now. I mean, it's really timeless when you think about it. And this is for a very fancy dress evening. Some women would wear full length gowns, but that wasn't the norm in this decade. Accessories were crazy. Even though the war was over, women were still kind of having fun with their hats. You can see the one on the far left, that's all feathers. And the one on the second lady from the left there with her very flat hat, very interesting. And then this one next to her, this style that I'm wearing, it was very common in the 50s. It's just I'm going to take it off. It's really cool. I don't know if you can see it well, but it's beautiful velvet strips, different colors of velvet. And it just fits right on the head, very simply. I just have my hair up in the back. So a lady might do that, have her hair out of her face and just wear this little hat. Sometimes they have little combs, but the inside was even fancy. You know, even had a beautiful floral lining. I love this hat. It says Vivian, looks like Vivian Carp, New York. So really cool hat. I love this hat. So this is a cocktail type hat for day wear though. And I love that third one from the left. That's very interesting. Women were still wearing berets during this time. And the hairstyles were not as long as the 40s. The 40s hairstyles were sort of long and wavy in many cases. By the 50s, you start to see them get short again, but curly, very curly. Accessories. I have some fun accessories to show you today. Handbags were a lot of fun in the 50s. And I have two examples of lucite bags like you see on the far left up there. And I'll show you those later. Jewelry. I have tons of vintage jewelry, but if we were in person, I would have brought a whole collection so you could walk around and look at them. But it would be very hard for me to do that on Zoom. But I have a lot of sets that go together. So you could have a brooch that matches the bracelet, the earrings, and the necklace. And it's called a parure, P-A-R-U-R-E. And if it's only 2 or 3 of the pieces and not the full set, it's a demi parure. So wonderful, wonderful sets of things. Like I said, everything matched, and I love that about it. Notice the gloves being a little bit longer in length because they had a lot of bracelet sleeves, especially the late 50s into the early 60s. So they were more of a 3/4 sleeve. So you don't want to have a bare arm. Even the outer coats would have that sleeve. So in order to cover the rest of your bare arm, you'd have a longer glove. And then the sunglasses, lots of cat eye glasses. I still love that shape. You can get reproductions of those now too. Bags for day wear were very structured usually. So alligator, crocodile bags. There's one up on the right there that's got the head on. I'm not too thrilled with that, but I do have a crocodile bag. It does not have the animal on it, but it is made from the animal skin from the 40s and 50s. I think it's actually 40s, this particular bag. Here's some examples of the jewelry I was telling you about. Lots of crazy costume jewelry, which I love. All different shapes, sizes, colors. And even shoes could be jeweled. Even shoes could be very fancy because remember, cocktail dress could be fairly simple, but you could think about the little black dress, but you can really dress it up with examples such as you're seeing here. Very kind of glittery jewelry, lots of color to give dressiness to something that's fairly simple. Gave a sophistication to it. I love this. Sometimes you even have an evening bag to match your shoes, which is the best. So that's the kind of thing that I miss about those days, is how people really, you know, watched their appearance and really wanted to dress up. And they had different ways of dressing for every occasion. Now we're at home, right? It's quarantine. I mean, I'm in sweats most of the time. I'm not in cocktail wear. I was saying to Liz, it's so cold today, I couldn't deal with wearing a cocktail dress, so I apologize for that. But I'm in kind of a fancy sweater for the fall and my cocktail hat. So forgive me for that. And I do have a big cocktail bracelet on for you. Usually I dress up a little bit more. This is something, I have some examples of these. These are called carry-alls or nécessaires. What they are is a way for a woman to go out in the evening, whether it's a cocktail party or just go out for dinner, and not have to carry a big day bag. All they had to do was carry their money, maybe some cigarettes, and some of them came with makeup in them. You can see a little place for powder, and I'll show you some examples of that. And so they didn't have to carry, there were no cell phones, so they didn't have to carry a big bag at night. They could carry a much smaller version. I collect these, so I just love, they're so beautiful. I have a couple with makeup. You could tell it's never been used. It's still perfect the way it is, never touched. More examples of gloves. Still had short gloves for day, but longer gloves for evening. And you can see some great sketches of different colors, lots of different color gloves there. This was just a video clip at the end of a movie that I adore. It's called Mona Lisa's Smile with Julia Roberts, and it's about a sort of a bohemian teacher who teaches art history, and she goes to Wellesley to teach, and they just really didn't accept her for the longest time. And this is just the very end, and I'm showing you this because it shows you real clips of women from the 50s, and it's a lot of fun. So here we go.
And what about after this war, Lee?
Well, this job belongs to some soldier. And when he comes back, he can have it.
Oh, that's swell.
In the heart of every girl, there's a woman waking up. Like sunlight spreads across the world. A smile for us is just enough. But in the heart of every girl, there's a homespun family dream. A life that's filled with so much joy, from a curly-haired beauty to a teenage queen. Honeymoons and summer through, we'll always love a bride. The gift you give us all is the one you hold inside. This lucky life, this crazy mixed up world, because we love what lives in our heart of every girl. In the heart of for Valentine's and boys to kneel and take their hands with words as sweet as summer wine. And in the heart of every girl, there is a rose for every spring. A peach that's fragrant and divine. She shines just like a wedding ring. And honeymoons in summer groove will always love a bride. The gift you give us all is the one you hold inside. This lucky life, this crazy mixed up world is all because we love what lives in the heart of every girl. Every girl.
You could see, I love the doing the floors with the heels and all of that, and the baby boom with the babies coming out. I just love that whole time period and just how they showed that. So I wanted to make sure I got you to see that. All right, here we have a man in his underwear. I don't talk about men as much. I usually have more women than men at these events, but not just that. The men's fashion, it changed, but not as quickly usually as women. So I tend to focus more on the ladies' fashion, but men are still wearing their tighty whities, but they also had more choices in boxers. So they had a lot of great prints in the 50s, not just for women, but for men too. So you're seeing, these atomic prints and all kinds of abstract prints in boxer shorts. So they had more variety. They were also seeing more color in shirts, ties, socks, etc. So not just a plain white shirt anymore. You started to see stripes and small patterns, and as I said, different colors. Lots of beach wear. I love these. Look at how short the shorts are on the men. And they had this matching shorts for the beach and shirts they wore open, and they usually had terry cloth on the inside. So they could come out of the water and just put that on and it would, dry them off, so to speak. Okay, why do I have Kramer up here? I don't know if any of you are Seinfeld fans, but I'm crazy about it. I think I know all the lines. I just love them. But I put this from Seinfeld because the character Kramer, his shirts were made from 50s fabrics. So I just think if you watch it or if you go through it and you just look at some of the things he's wearing, it's almost always 50s fabrics that they've made his shirts from. So I just think that's interesting. Okay, menswear, fedoras, hats. You probably know this, but it breaks my heart when I think about the fact that men no longer wear hats like that. Everybody wore hats. When did it stop? When President John Kennedy didn't wear a hat to his inauguration, and the men got rid of them. So no more nice fedoras. Now we see pretty much baseball caps, not much else. But, sometimes you'll see some young men with little fedoras or with golf caps or driving caps, but very, very seldom, unfortunately. Different hats. The Alpine was another big hat at the time. Here's your driving cap. Pork pie. I remember my dad talking about those hats. And then in the 50s, you started to see the younger generation, the teenager, the first kind of time that was coined, that term, the teenager. You started to see separate fashions and styles. So the young men would either be very conservative, sort of like their dads, or they would be more influenced by men like Marlon Brando and James Dean in the movies of that time, more of the tough guy with the ducktail hairstyle as you see here. So that was just something more for the very young men or teenagers of the time. Shoes, these aren't that different from what we'd see now, in men's shoes. The blue suede shoes, we know about those from the Elvis song. White bucks were big in the 50s, penny loafers as well, and of course, Oxfords. Ties, as I mentioned, ties, socks, any kind of accessories for men were becoming more interesting in terms of color, pattern, etc. And all men carried hankies. They just carried handkerchiefs. I used to iron my dad's handkerchiefs for him. I couldn't iron much else, but I would iron either his undershirts or his handkerchiefs, because all the men carried them at the time. Sunglasses, of course, were a little different. You didn't see the cat's eye on the men, but they had their own kind of funky style as well. And then young kids, not the teens, but many times the young boys and girls would sort of be, small versions of their parents in terms of how they dressed. And then eventually they're going to become teenagers and do their own thing. This is how real young boys dressed at the time. These are right out of Sears catalog. That's what you're seeing here. So you're seeing like little versions of their moms with the full skirts, and the little cinched waists, so to speak. No corsets or girdles, but definitely a similar silhouette as their moms. And here's the teenage look. The poodle skirt was one teenage fashion, many times worn with a sleeveless shell or with a bowling shirt like this young lady on the right has. Saddle shoes and bobby socks, another famous fad from the 50s. So they were developing their own personal styles apart from their parents. This is more of the conservative look of young men and women, more of the collegiate look, much more conservative, leather sweaters, more likely to wear shirts and ties than some of the younger men who were influenced by a different group of people, such as here you see a little tougher looking couple of guys on the right, and Marlon Brando there on the left with his jeans and leather jacket and motorcycle boots. Other things were going on. They had the Beats in the 50s, and different people and getting together and talking about things that weren't discussed in the past, more philosophical kinds of discussions and that kind of thing. And Jack Kerouac is one example. So they called that the Beat generation. And in England, they were called the Teddy Boys. The Teddy Boys dressed more like Edwardians did, the turn of the century kind of man. And eventually this is going to come over here a little bit when the Beatles come over, because they dressed a little bit more Edwardian when they first came over here to America, but then they changed their styles as well. Okay, real quickly, I'm just going to show you a few slides from Mad Men. I don't know, like I said, if you've seen it or not, but the main character is the man on the right. That's Don Draper. This was an advertising agency on Madison Avenue from, like I said, 60 to 69. And so that's why they call it Mad Men. It's Madison Avenue and advertising, and all of the crazy things that they did. They'd have bars in their offices. Of course, everybody was smoking at their desks, and they just mix a drink at 10 o'clock in the morning before their meeting. I mean, it's crazy. It's entertaining, I'll tell you, but a little different than how we conduct ourselves at work now, I guess one would hope anyway. Lots of drinking, smoking, etc. And you can see the styles. The young lady in the back, that's Betty Draper. That's Don Draper's wife, more of the classic 50s dresses with the fuller skirts, whereas Joan, that's the office manager on the left, is in that tight sort of wiggle type dress like I told you about. So you'll see her in a video clip. More cocktail wear. You see our Mad Men girls on the bottom in cocktail dresses. And that's, of course, our Audrey Hepburn in the typical or quintessential little black dress. These are our Mad Men, some of the cast members. Gray flannel suits, white shirts, thin ties, pretty much everybody, and clean cut. You didn't see the facial hair early in the 60s, and the hair was very conservative and short. This is the trailer from the first season, so you'll get to see these people in action.
If you follow my lead, you can avoid some of the mistakes I've made here. Now try not to be overwhelmed by all this technology. It looks complicated, but the men who designed it made it simple enough for a woman to use. Who does she work for?
This handsome fellow is Don Draper, the best creative director in New York.
Bringing in business is the key to your salary, your status, and your self-worth.
You're looking at the finest ad men in New York.
What you call love was invented by guys like me to sell nylons.
Being with a client is like being in a marriage. Sometimes you get into it for the wrong reasons, and eventually they hit you in the face.
My goodness, you're Mrs. Draper, aren't you? He doesn't know what family is. I don't understand why you can't make my family your family. The way he makes love, sometimes it's obviously what someone else wants.
It matters to me that you're impressed.
Pete, you're making a fool of yourself. You've enlisted my expertise, and you've rejected it to go on the way you've been going.
Anybody mind if I take off my pants?
This place really runs on charm. I just realized something. You think you're being helpful.
A man is whatever room he is in.
I heard you were amazing in the meeting.
Fear stimulates my imagination.
That's why he won the award.
Kids today, they have no one to look up to because they're looking up to us.
Highly recommended if you've never seen it. 7 seasons. I think you'll probably get it on Netflix or Prime if you have that. Well worth it. Loved it. Okay, real quickly, I'll go through the 60s because a lot of the 50s carries over, but I just want you to see how it changed because, again, Mad Men did that with their costuming. They ended it in 69, so they were definitely in a different frame of mind in terms of fashion by that time. So here you go. I just wanted to show you, again, there's your new look. And then by the time we got into the mid-60s, we're looking at the London influence. So think about things like Mary Quant and the miniskirt, Andre Korres with a lot of them. He was also using the mini a lot in his designs. And so a lot of the fashion was coming from the streets versus trickling down from the couture houses. So you start to see a completely different aesthetic happening, especially for younger people at the time. Models such as Twiggy became very, very popular and very influential. And this sort of like ingenue little girl look became very popular in the 60s, especially mid-60s and a little bit into the later part of the decade as well. Lots of eye makeup, heavy, heavy eye makeup, even drawing lower lashes like Twiggy did, and but very pale lips. That for some reason the lips were very pale and very frosted, which that changed again as we go through the 80s for sure. But in the 60s, it was all about the eyes. This is Mary Quant, and again, her mini skirts were popular, but she said, you know, I didn't invent the mini skirt. It came from the street. I was just watching what the young people were doing. And then on the bottom are her, similar to when you think about the go-go boots, the white go-go boots that you'll see in a minute. These are her version, and they were patent leather, red as you can see. And she just threw a lot of colors together. It was very modern, and they called them the mods. They were just wearing a completely different silhouette than their parents, than their moms were wearing. And the skirts just kept getting shorter and shorter. Here we have another designer named Emilio Pucci. I actually have a real Pucci skirt. He had sort of a kaleidoscope of patterns and wonderful color combinations, beautiful. And he, you know, he always signed his fabric, Emilio, when he finished with his fabric and his garments. So I do have one skirt that was given to me by a friend I used to work with. It was her mom's. So I'm very proud of that skirt. It no longer fits me, but I still have it in my collection. And then the space race in the 60s, that was an important thing going on. As you know, we were racing with Russia to be the first man on the moon. And of course we won that in 69, but it was all about the future and, you know, moving forward and these new synthetic fabrics. I mean, back then polyester was kind of nasty. Those old double knits, if you remember any of those, but that's what you're seeing here, this very stiff kind of heavy fabric of this period. So these are the very casual day wear, but with that Star Trek kind of look to it, because again, it was a space age collection and it was the zeitgeist of the time. Andre Korres, another important designer of the period. Those are his white go-go boots. You could also get boots that were to the knee, and many of them were just made out of vinyl. They weren't always real leather, but Andre Korres used a lot of vinyl and plastics in his clothing too. If you see the third girl from the left on the bottom, you can see that shiny, that sort of wet look plastic, like wet look leather, but it wasn't real leather. That was used a lot in many designers' collections, but Andre Korres was famous for that. Another crazy set of clothing materials were metal discs, and Paco Rabanne was a designer who used those immensely, and doesn't look like it would be very comfortable, almost like wearing chainmail, but that was a very big deal as well in the 60s. whoops, sorry. Biba was a boutique, kind of a new way of looking at shopping and buying fashion. And Barbara Hulanicki and her husband opened this boutique in London, and it sort of was the forerunner to what we think of as fast fashion today. It was affordable for teens and young women, and you know, the boutiques were sort of dark and mysterious, as you can see on the bottom right. And the clothing was more focused on more 30s and 40s aesthetic, as opposed to the modern fashions we were just looking at in the previous slides. But wonderful place for young women to shop, and it became, boutiques, of course, became all the rage. Here she is again, heavy eye makeup. Because this is focusing more 30s and 40s in their style, the lips are much brighter, and usually red lipstick versus the pale colors we were seeing. More influences of the 60s were, of course, the art movements, and one of those was op art, optical illusion art. So when you look at it, it's almost like you get dizzy. I remember I had a black and white bracelet when I was young during this time, and it was metal, but it was the dress on the right, it's like those big squares. It was like that. It was really cool. I wish I'd saved it, but who knew? I don't know what happened to it. So lots of black and white, and also pop art, popular art. So think Andy Warhol and all of his, you know, Campbell soup cans and etc. This is Yves Saint Laurent made this Mondrian dress. I believe it was 68, if I'm not mistaken. So based on the Mondrian painting, that's what you're seeing. That's YSL, and that was pretty widely copied. They even had paper dresses. The Campbell Soup and other companies would let you order a dress for $1, provided you sent in some labels from their cans of soup. I think it was 3 labels and $1 would get you one of these dresses. If you look this up on eBay, you look at some completed auctions, and you should see what these things go for, especially if they're still in the package. Unbelievable. Very big fad, very short-lived, but boy, do they cost some bucks now. Music influence in the 60s, of course, we did have that in the 50s as well, with rock and roll, with Elvis, and a lot of other wonderful music that was happening. But the Beatles were really new to us, and they came over in the early 60s and brought their music and their style with them. And other designers, there was a young Ralph Lauren in 67 who designed his first polo tie line for men, and very wide. You can get these, if you like to collect things, you can find these pretty good prices in most vintage or even thrift stores. You can get 70s ties, just very exaggerated, but his, of course, were very nicely made fabrics. He also came out with menswear, and then in 68 or 67, at 68, and then women in 71. He's still around. And then just to fast forward a little bit, this is what it looked like in the later part of the Mad Men series. So as we got into the later 60s, you start to see a complete change. Betty is even wearing something a little bit more psychedelic in terms of the colors and the swirls in the fabric design. And the new wife of Don Draper, Megan, is much younger. So she's going to be in the latest styles of the later 60s. So you start to see the empire waist come up in that period. And so those are good examples of that. Lots of synthetic fabrics again. And lots of swirly colors. If you look in both of these pictures, you'll see some of the ladies wear lots of loud colors, just almost Peter Max type designs and color combinations. And that's our conservative Don Draper, which he pretty much stays the same way throughout. Doesn't really change his look like some of the other people who work in the agency did. Developed long sideburns and had longer hair and beards and that kind of thing. But Don stayed pretty true to his usual self. And this is the last scene. I won't tell you about it because if you've never seen it, I don't want to spoil it. But this was the last episode of season 7. So just to finish up before I show you my collection, this was from Rhode Island School of Design's cocktail culture exhibit a number of years ago when I did a class for them too. And it had everything. It had fashion, beautiful designer fashions for cocktails, This is Norman Norell in 1949, and showed the jewelry that might have gone with it. Simonetta, 1958 on the left. Chanel, 1958 on the right. Nice strapless dress from the 50s. A Dior from 54. As you could see, remember I was telling you that after his initial new look with the really cinched waist, you started to see a little bit more of a loosening at the waist. There's a hat from Balenciaga, 63, all feathers. It's fabulous. I saw that. Of course, I saw all of this in person. It was wonderful. The cocktail wear, the bar wear is to die for. Everything was based on speed. And, you know, early when the cocktail culture began in the 20s and 30s, you started to see not only Art Deco design, but this sort of moving ahead like rockets and trains and things that moved fast. And a lot of the bar wear was based on that. That's an Art Deco set on the left from the 20s and another one from the 20s or 30s on the right. Fabulous stuff. Russell Wright was a designer from early 20th century, earlier, you know, part of this period. And he was way ahead of his time. Very, very modern, sculptural kinds of dinnerware and even glasses like you see here. Very popular, very big in the 50s. And here's your cocktail parties again. And that's it for my slideshow and video clips. And I'm going to just stop the share, and we're going to talk a little bit more about some examples of cocktail dresses and accessories, and then I'll open it up to questions. So hang in there. Let me get out of there. Okay. All right, here we go. Get rid of that. Okay, first thing I'm going to show you is this is a petticoat, but it could be worn as a skirt because it's several layers. Again, I try really hard so that you can see. I hope you can see it okay. It's gorgeous. It's like a, oh, it's hard to explain, almost like a light peach color. And it's satin underneath it. And then the top layer of tulle has little gold, almost like sequins all over it. It's beautiful. So it could have been worn as a skirt for evening wear, but it could also be worn as a fancy petticoat under another skirt. So I bought this years ago in a vintage store. I love it. I found this in a vintage store and wore it to one of my I told you I have 7 stepchildren. I always tried to wear vintage to their weddings. So this is a beautiful piece, velvet top, and the bottom it's gorgeous. It's embroidered floral design on this off-white skirt. And the back, a lot of times in the 50s and early 60s, this low kind of cut in the back was very popular on dresses. You see that often. But this is a beautiful dress too. I love this one for cocktails. It's a little different. This is a mint green, and it's wool. The top part is wool. It's really cool. And it has all of this embroidery, little flowers with little beads embroidered. And it has, the belt is wool like the top. And the skirt is all chiffon. I love it. And it's got some tulle underneath. So it has a self petticoat. So this is really gorgeous. Love this one. Another typical 50s dress for cocktails. This cummerbund effect was very popular in this period. And so this is just a nice satin insert here. It's just like a sort of a cream colored dress with gorgeous floral pattern, very light pink and green. And again, self petticoat of netting underneath. And then it zips up, but it has this cool extension to the cummerbund in the back, almost like it could hold a bustle. It's just so unusual and in beautiful condition too. This is the dress I wore to my wedding in 2012 when we did the Mad Men theme. And I love this dress. I found this in an antique store as well. I just was able to zip it up, but I had to wear Spanx because these fabrics are not forgiving. We don't have this, you know, the stretchy fabrics in these older dresses. So if I wanted to eat or breathe, I had to wear Spanx. So that's what I did. And but gorgeous flocking of black velvet And this same cummerbund effect with just these ribbons of velvet going across and that nice scallop neckline and low back cut. Great dress with the self petticoat underneath. A little different version is this. This is fabulous. This dress is probably late 50s or maybe 1960. It is this ikat type blurry weave in the fabric of floral. And the bottom of the dress has a bow, which was common for the early 60s or even late 50s. And look at the back. It has a separate panel. It's attached at the bottom, but it's chiffon. It's the same print as the dress, but it's in chiffon. It's so amazingly different and unusual. I just love this dress. And this dress, I wore to one of my kids' weddings too. This is a beautiful brocade green and blue satin dress. That's just a shift style. Very simple silhouette, but boy, is the fabric phenomenal. Beautiful, well made. And then I'm going to pick up the mannequin because down here, I don't know if you can see this, I hope you can, the sides open up into this iridescent fabric. Fantastic. I love this dress. Two more things. This is just a lovely little piece from the 50s. And it's, you know, they had a lot of sweaters that were short like this in the 50s and early 60s, and that had a lot of beading. But this is all beads. And it's like ombre. It's all sequins the whole way down. And it goes into very, very deep pink. And inside is just what you would see in a sweater, usually from that period. It's just like a little crepe lining. I love this piece. It's beautiful with the 3/4 sleeve. And this one, which goes right over the hip, because remember I showed you those girdles and petticoats that sort of covered the hip and gave it support. This is all beads. This is just a top that would have gone maybe with a plain skirt. This would have been the signature piece. It's beautiful. All incredible beading on this. I wish you could see it in person and come up close and see it, but hope you can get an idea. A lot of iridescent beads as well. But the inside is sort of like a sweater. Very interesting piece. I love this one too. And now I'm going to finish up with the accessories. Here's that bag I told you about. This is all crocodile, alligator. It doesn't have, fortunately, it doesn't have the head on it. I'm a big animal advocate, and if it's vintage and it was before I was born, I don't feel too bad collecting it. I would never buy a new one, but here you go with, it's got the handle on the back, and you open it up, and just, you know, simple, but absolutely beautiful. I love older bags because you never know what you're going to find in them. I have a number of bags from 30s, 40s, 50s that inside it comes with things. A little purse attached for your money, coins, a comb, mirror. So I love that. When you look for vintage bags, always look inside and see if there's a little treasure in there as well. Look at these shoes. This was a very big thing in the 50s. This would have been perfect for cocktail wear. This is a plastic at the top, and it's stiff now. I'm sure it was much more supple years ago. And it has this technology that was big in the 50s. So the woman's foot wouldn't go too far forward and hang over. It had what they called a springulator in here. So the woman would put her foot in, it would push it down, but then it would spring back into place so her foot would stay where it was. And look at the heel. It's all etched with stones, and it's plastic. But you could even buy, sometimes the shoes came with replacement heels. So you could just go to the cobbler and they would put a new set of heels on for you. Two bags that are made of lucite. Like I said, these are great for cocktail, you know, for evening or even an afternoon cocktail party. This is all lucite, again, carved at the top. These bags were very big in the 50s. Very plain, just like a box bag, all plastic. And another one It has these beautiful bronze or gold bronze stars all over them, all over it, with the little handle that comes up like this. And it has 2 layers to it. You open it here, just to put maybe your cigarettes in there, and then you open it there for the bigger pot. Just so interesting. So I love these bags. I have a couple more hats. I know I'm wearing one now. This is the velvet one that I was showing you. This is just such a sweet little straw hat. It says French Shops, Filene's Boston, Seal Thal, New York. And just the little cocktail hats with, I don't think I have any hats that don't have, you know, none of them have perfect netting, because after a while, this stuff is just going to start to separate. But this was all the rage, was the hat with the little netting over the face. So I just thought that was a sweet little spring hat. And again, the inside is gorgeous. You know, it's like a damask fabric. It's not just a plain old piece of whatever fabric. It's really nice. And then this one is interesting too. This is similar to the style I have on, and it's orange, but it's got velvet and satin and a little bit of netting on it. I love this piece. It doesn't have a label except for union label on it. It doesn't have a designer name or anything, but just fabulous condition. And the little net that comes down here with a hole, so it's got holes in it, of course. Like I said, it's tough to find one in perfect shape. Few more things. Speaking of cocktails, I told you that I had bought this the other day at the antique store down the street. In the original box, it says Cheese Pixies. Let's see, 12 picks for cheese. So they're little cats or mice. I thought they were cats. They're little mice, pink and white mice. So that, you know, when a woman had a cocktail party at the home, they weren't just going to put plain old toothpicks out there, right? They're going to put something fancy. So this is a great example of that. And I love that it's still in the original box. Smoking was big back then, you know. People didn't realize the extent of the damage it can do. And this is a fabulous little snake skin. Wait till you see what happens here. Snake skin cigarette holder. Now, why is it short? Because the cigarettes were unfiltered, right? Think about your Camel unfiltered, Camel cigarettes. So watch what happens when I press this. Look, it comes up, it pops up, the little box pops up, and so your cigarettes will come right out. And it still has the tag on it. And it says Evans. And it came in its own box, Evans box. This is a wonderful find. And this is one of my favorite things. I usually make people guess, but I know you're on mute. Got a little cigarette on it. Okay, it's got a little handle. Watch what happens next. Ta-da! Whoop, didn't open all the way. You just put your cigarette, it's because I have this on an angle. You put your little cigarette and let it hang right there, and the ashes go in there. Is that amazing? I love it. I love these little things that they had back then. And then finally, I just want to show you a few compacts. I collect a lot of them, and I just wanted to show you. They were so fancy. This is someone's initials. This is Elgin American. That's a very famous compact company from the time. And it looks like, I can't tell. It looks like YS. I'm not sure. But beautiful gold compact. You open it up and ta-da! Never used. Elgin American, never used, in perfect shape. So loose powder would go in there, of course. Women would have her little powder puff that you see there. This is amazing. I've never seen one like this until I found this in an antique store in Salem, Mass. This looks like a wallet, doesn't it? It's I think it's blue. It's hard to tell if it's black or black. It's navy blue with gold embroidery on it, thread. You open it up and it's a compact and a lipstick. So you put your lipstick here. Many times you could get, you know, they'd have refills in them, or you could get refills for them. This one, let's see if I can make it. Yeah, it won't do it. But you could, it doesn't have anything in it because it was meant to put your own lipstick in. And the compact is very fancy. Oh, I love this so much. All bejeweled on the top. And again, you open it up and it says a signer. But the fact that it comes in this little wallet just amazes me. So I thought you'd appreciate that. Let's see, one more or two more. This one came in the original box. Volupté is another very famous maker of necessaires, carryalls like this, and compacts. This is all, it looks like it's woven gold. It has a little strap. So again, a woman would just carry this as is to go out maybe in the evening. And it has two different sides. So you open up one side. Here's your lipstick and your powder. And this could be for anything. You could put money in there, you know, whatever a lady would like to do. And then in this side, you could put cigarettes, perhaps. So two sides. So anything a woman might need would fit in here. And then the last thing I have is this one, which is mother of pearl. I think this was kind of common. I've seen several of these out and about, but I love it. Mother of pearl is still a necessaire. It still has its little chain to carry with. And same idea, just what you just saw in the last one, except this one, instead of opening separately, you just bring the mirror down and there you can put your cigarettes or money or whatever. So that is all my collection I have for you today. And so I'm going to open it up and ask you to unmute or have Leslie unmute or whatever. And I want to see if you have any comments or questions.
That was incredible.
Thanks.
I feel like I could watch you go through your closet for hours, right?
We'll do a whole day. Thanks. It's fun. It's fun. I can't even show everything I have because I've got so much stuff, but I just brought out the best pieces for the particular period, you know, that way. Good representation of that. Anybody have any questions or comments or remembering anything from, you know, their parents or, you know, anything you can remember from the period? No
yeah, this is Lois Smith, Petticoat Smith. I can remember wearing like 3 crinolines underneath my skirts.
Yeah.
When I was in grade school.
Yeah.
You know, to really get that fullness. You couldn't just wear one.
Oh, you wanted them to stick out, to really stand out. That's right. Yeah. So they had.
And then also, do you have other eras in your collection?
Oh, yes. I go back as far. The oldest piece I have is from 1870s, I believe. I have a couple of pieces from the 1870s. I don't have much from the early days because there's not much that still survives unless it's in a museum. But I have a few 20s pieces, 30s, 40s, and 50s, a little bit more. Yeah. And jewelry and accessories, I have some things that are quite old as well.
Yeah. We have a 1930s car, and I was thinking it would be fun to come up with an outfit to wear when we go to car shows with that particular car.
Definitely you have to wear something 30s. Just something kind of slinky below the knee, you know, and you know, satin was always great, especially if you're going out in the evening, because that was, you know, that really shiny satin, and a lot of dresses cut on the bias in the 30s. So very slinky. Yeah, that'd be nice. That would be nice.
Thanks.
Sure. Anybody else have any questions, comments?
Oh, nice program though.
Thank you so much. I hope I get to see you all again at some point, maybe even in person someday, you know, so, but yeah, please, I have a website, and if you ever want to email me with questions or anything like that, it's spiritsoffashion.net. So you're certainly welcome to do that. And I do have other presentations that I do, but this is one of my favorites. Somebody have a question?
Elaine?
No, I was just going to say we covered the bathing suits of the time, but we didn't do the short shorts.
Oh, the short shorts. Yeah, because even in the 50s, I have a picture of Marilyn Monroe, not in this particular one, but in the Golden Age of Hollywood one. She's playing like baseball, and she's got these short little white shorts on. Yeah.
And in the 60s, we had the short shorts under, it was almost like a chemise or a trapeze style. The longer shirt, but the very short shorts.
Yep. And then they became hot pants. Remember that? In 1970s. Hot pants.
I had a pair until last year that I wore in high school.
Oh, that's so cool.
If I had known you then, I had some great contributions because I saved them for years.
Oh, I wish I'd saved what I had. I just didn't know I was going to do this. You know, I had no idea. And when you're young, you just want to keep moving forward with the new stuff. You don't want to think about your old stuff, right?
No, I always kept my old stuff. I love my old stuff.
Oh, I think that's great. That's great.
I used to do ballroom dancing, so a lot of it came in handy.
Oh, yeah, you must have beautiful things from that period.
I did.
Yeah.
Savers got them all. Nobody wanted them.
Oh, see, you can still find great stuff at Savers. See that?
Yes.
You got to be willing to look, but boy, you can find some gems. That's right. That's right.
Ren, I'm curious, what does your everyday closet look like?
Well,
is it themed?
It's funny. No, we had a store in well, I taught fashion, as I said, for 13 years. So I used to wear I'd wear vintage blazers, vintage jackets a lot, especially 40s, a lot of vintage jewelry. But I worked in Boston and I had to commute on the train. So I never really wore full vintage. But we had a store from 2013 to 2018 in Providence called Nostalgia. And it was a 3-floor co-op my husband and I owned, and I could dress up more there because, but I only really dress up when I do these events as far as doing vintage. But I miss it because, like I said, what are we doing? Where are we going in quarantine? So I'm really not dressing like I used to. But we are opening a cafe in a couple of days, if you can believe that, here in Queechee, called Nostalgia Cafe. We're opening it. So I'm going to hopefully be able to wear a little bit more vintage inspired. Have been, because I'll have some place to go and wear it. Because here I just can't justify dressing up at home. I just can't. So, but yeah, I used to have a lot of fun with it. I miss that styling part of it. Whether it was real vintage or vintage inspired, it's just so much fun to change it up every day. So I'll try to get back into that again. So we'll
take lots of pictures of the opening and put them on your website.
I will. We will definitely.
Yeah. And everyone who's watching, please go visit the website. Ren has a listing of all the other presentations she does. So there's one on shoes, one on makeup, and if you want to see something else, send me an email, give me a call, let me know which one you're interested in. I think you even do one on this, like the Salem witch trials.
Oh yeah, Bewitched. I did one of those in October. Salem. Yeah, I just talk about the 1600s, but I also talk about the witch trial thing and all that. Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, I love it. I've really enjoyed this.
Thank you.
What's the website again?
Thank you.
What's that? I'm sorry.
What's the website again?
Oh, it's spiritsofashion.net.
Yeah, it would be good if you had that printed for those of us that are hard of hearing.
Oh,
I'll send it out.
Oh, you know what?
Well, but I'm saying as part of your presentation at the very end, maybe.
Oh, did I put it on this one? Yeah, now that I stop. Yeah, you know what? It might be at the last slide, but I can't move it forward, unfortunately.
Don't worry about it. We don't need it now, but I'm just
suggesting. Good idea. Thank you for that. I'll definitely make sure it's up there. Thank you. Anybody else? Questions, comments? I appreciate you all being here. You made my day.
Thank you very much.
This was so fun.
Thank you. Thanks so much, everybody. Hope to see you all again, and stay well and enjoy your holidays.
You too. You too.
In your small groups, right? Take care of yourselves.
Take care. Thanks. Nice to meet you.
Thanks, Liz. Thanks, everybody.